What's good, fam? Welcome back to the channel. This is Constant Sports, and I am your host, Constance. Now, I don't even know what to talk about this week. Do I talk about the rankings that just came out, or do I talk about one of the craziest weekends we've had in women's college basketball in a long time? So many teams, so many teams were defeated this weekend that every time you turn around, it was like, oh, Baylor lost. Oh, Baylor lost again, and then it was Stanford lost, then LSU lost, UCLA lost. It's like, do I talk about that or standings? But I was like, if I talk about standings, then eventually I'm going to talk about the losses, right? So we're going to keep with our regularly scheduled program, and we're going to talk about the rankings that was just released. And obviously, the one team that didn't move or really change was good old South Carolina, who is still the lone undefeated team um, in the top 25. So they're still sitting at number one. Iowa, who is 17-1, moved up a spot, so they're now the number two team. Colorado, who had a huge win against Stanford, is sitting at number two, coming up two positions. NC State came up two positions to number four. UCLA losing to USC, dropped down three positions at number five. Now, the UCLA and USC. So UCLA is number five, USC is number six. And one came down three, one came up three. And I know a lot of people was like, well, USC beat UCLA. That is correct. They did beat, USC did beat UCLA. But the level of competition UCLA has played compared to USC, they take that into fact. Both teams only have one loss, right? Um, but the level of play that UCLA has been playing all season, the teams they played up against, and the fact that USC is still a young team. Yes, they've been playing amazing, but they're pretty much just one player who has to have an amazing game every night, which that's how it's working for them. So keep going. Just like for Iowa, they're pretty much a one person team, but it's working for them, and we just gotta roll with it. It's only an issue when it actually affects them. Um, USC and UCLA's game, the crowd was insane. The game was intense, back and forth. I mean, these are two teams that play each other a lot, right? You would call them across the area of rivals, right? So them playing each other, who they're familiar with playing each other. So you expected eventually for USC to beat them, right? But UCLA didn't give their best effort. They struggled, and I feel like a couple of the teams that lost this weekend, they were having an off game. And I guess this was not the weekend to have an off game because it affected a lot of ranked teams, top ranked teams. But when news is going to happen, conference play starts, things switch up, right? That's why we always say don't worry about the rankings until conference season comes around. When conference time comes around, that's when the real basketball is played because your conference, when you're playing within your conference, you play each other tougher because you got to beat them to make it to March, right? You have to beat them to make it far in March. So this is the real season. Those early games, that's just preseason. This is the real season in the conference play, and it's showing. These teams are showing up and they're balling. They're giving these teams everything they got, right? You have Stanford, who stays steady at number eight, um, which makes sense. I like that. I like that Stanford stayed where they were. Um, I know a lot of people don't. Some people might think they should drop in rankings, But no, it's there's no need to there's no need to drop them in ranking because Colorado was higher ranking than them. So theoretically, Colorado should have beat Stanford because they have a better record, right? They they have sustained that. And yes, Stanford has come up and down in the polls, but Colorado was ranked higher than them. They were ranked at number 5, and the number 5 team should beat the number 8 team, right? So that's what they did. And the fact that Stanford was able to stay where they are, I agree with it. I have no issues. Um, Kansas State creeped up, came up 5 positions. Now, Kansas State, they're a good team. The Kansas State and Texas game was intense. Texas has really figured out a way to play their style of basketball, even with the loss of Rory. The next man up mentality, they found it, they adapted to it. It is them. Texas is the definition of next man up mentality. Um, their their freshman, she has been pretty much came in playing for Harmon. I think her name's Booker. She pretty much was the best player on the floor for Texas against Kansas with, let me find it, 23 points. But for Kansas, Lee is very dominant. Her presence is known anytime she's on the floor. And to beat Kansas, you have to be able to find a way to at least slow her down, keep her off the floor by getting her into foul trouble, which is what, in the beginning, yes. But eventually, she's a very smart player, so there's not really much you can do with a post player who's a very smart player and understands that people are going to try to push her to foul them. It's a very hard defense to ask. Um, UConn came up number 4. They're having a very good stretch here. They're winning their games. They're pushing. They're adapting to everything that's happened to them this season, and that's what you want from your team. Injuries are gonna happen. People are gonna be out for sickness and all these different things. It's gonna happen, but there's a reason why there's more than 5 people on a basketball team, right? Everyone has to be ready because you never know what happens. And yes, UConn has been hit with injuries for the past 2-3 years. So everyone who's on the bench has definitely played a lot more than other bench players in the conference and in the league in general. So they're a team that's ready. They just had to figure out how to gel all the new pieces together when someone else falls out. So they have definitely pieced it together and they're working well together. Paige Buckers is the leader of the team, and Edwards, and they're getting their teams the wins that they need. Next, number 10. Rounding out the number 10 is LSU, who dropped 3 positions after their loss to Auburn. And it was straight up just not a good day. LSU was off, except for Angel Reese. She pretty much did on Sunday what she's been doing, right? It was just her teammates were just off that game. And don't get me wrong, the environment in Auburn in the stadium was amazing, which is what LSU has been used to for a while now, right? Since maybe the middle of last season, they've been used to the craziness, so that didn't affect them. It was just the fact that they were off. They wasn't hitting their shots. They wasn't moving. Um, they didn't have that many turnovers. I think they were 15, which is still a lot in a game, but not for college. For college, 15 is actually good. So they cut back on their steal or their turnovers, but they wasn't playing good defense. They wasn't moving around, so there wasn't a lot of outlet passes. They wasn't shooting the three. They only shot, I think, maybe three threes. And I was like, y'all been hitting these threes lately. What what's happening? So the defense, playing very tough defense on LSU, is what you're starting to notice if you're playing tough defense on the guards. And not just the guards, but Haley Van Leaf. Putting Poa in, you can play tough defense all you want to, and she's still going to beat you, right? She's used to playing in the SEC. She's used to playing at the point guard, and she's a lot more comfortable in this system than Haley is. Not saying that Haley won't get there. She will. She's adapting. She's becoming more. She's finding her shot more, right? But the fact that LSU only scored, what was it, 62 points? That that's not an LSU team that we've been used to, right? If you look at the box score, right? LSU is a team where all five of its starters have at least 10 points, double digits. Haley Van Leith only had 3 points, and Williams only had 7 points. Their field goal percentage was 41 to Auburn's 44. They actually only shot two 3-pointers, which is not normal for LSU this year. They've definitely shot more 3-pointers this year than they did last year, except for that championship game. But yeah, they only had even one block, and that was Angel Reese. But your only consistent point was Angel Reese with 24 points, 11 rebounds. Morrow had 12 points, 15 rebounds, and Flage had 12 points. So those are your three people who we know is going to show up, right? If Morrow and Angel aren't hitting their shots, they're going to get in there and they're going to fight to where they get a foul and they're getting to the free throw line. So even though Morrow didn't even shoot a free throw, right? So it was a lot of things that fell off for LSU, and Auburn was not, right. It wasn't falling off. They had two players in double digits. Everyone else just pitched in. That was the difference. Everyone who played in the game pitched in except for their center, which you can't really put in a center in a game that has two post players who can rebound and defend is hard. But Auburn got contributions for everyone. And even in the interview that Coach Mulkey did and Auburn's head coach, the effort that Auburn put forth compared to LSU, Auburn was just playing harder. They wanted it more. And maybe it was the fact that LSU looked at Auburn as like, they're not really a competition, maybe. But I don't see that much in the women's game. And to think Auburn was 11-4 before this game started. So they didn't have a bad record. They had a bad record in the SEC, right? They were 0-3 in the SEC. So they got their first win against LSU, and LSU got their first loss of the conference against Auburn. So conference play is hard, but you can't have everyone's gonna have a bad day, and it sucks, right? And so it happened to LSU, right? And it's going to continue to happen as the season goes along. The next team I want to talk about is Baylor, who is sitting at number 12. They dropped down 8 positions after being 14-0 and losing back-to-back games. I wasn't able to watch their game against Kansas, but I did watch their game against Iowa State. And Iowa State isn't ranked this year, which I am surprised at, because Iowa State has been ranked the past few years. They've been a good team the past few years. They're young, they're fast, but the difference between Iowa and Baylor between a lot of other teams, is size. Baylor, I don't think will be able to win many ball games if you're playing against a team that has a competent big. If you play against a team who has size in the paint and that size knows how to use it, if that makes sense, Baylor is going to struggle with that. And they try to, and because of that, they don't have size, they couldn't go in that much because their post players wasn't able to make the moves they wanted to. They wasn't able to bully anyone to get their rebounds, to get their putbacks, to turn around and hit their shots. So it was a lot of 3-point shots, quick jumpers, and it wasn't working. So until Baylor can figure out how to play ball without having size, which everyone, yes, they went 14-0, but it's conference play now, and these teams do have size. And I didn't realize how small Baylor was until I actually watched the game and realized that. I mean, yes, they played against TCU, but that was a TCU without Price, right? So if Price was there at TCU, I don't think Baylor would have won. I do not think Baylor would have won. I think TCU would have been Baylor's first loss if Price was there because of her size and her ability to be inside and outside. So now you're making Baylor's post players move around a lot. And then when she posts them up, she's a lot more experienced than they are. So Baylor definitely has to figure out some things when it comes to size and how to work with that, but also the fact that losing 2 games back to back in conference play is tough. It's tough, and it really stunts their growth to the point where there's no room for error at the moment. I mean, their next game is against UCF, so we'll see how they bounce back and figure things out. But then you got UCF, and then you play Kansas, which is the one team with the best post player. So playing against Baylor, playing against Kansas State, uh, yeah, I don't know. We shall see. That pretty much rounds out the top 10. The 11 through 25 is pretty much the same. A lot of teams dropped down, and a couple teams moved up, except UNLV stay the same at number 25. I do see them going up. I'm not quite sure why they didn't go up, um, but I do see them going up. North Carolina lost, so they dropped down 3 positions. Everyone else just dropped down 1 position after the losses. There's a lot of losses this weekend, and I feel like with all those losses, we're still the same, right? It's different when one team loses and everyone else wins, but when you have 4 and 5 top 10 ranked teams are losing, it's like, do things really shift? Do things really shake up? And it doesn't really. Uh, yes, they lose rankings and stuff wise, but okay. I think LSU was ranked number 7, maybe. I think they were ranked number 7 last year, all throughout March Madness up until they were at the championship. So rankings, if you're doing what you're supposed to do in conference play, you'll be all right. Now, thank you guys for watching and supporting me. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Peace, love, happiness.